Hello, my name is Brant Hunt. My channel is Discerning What is True. Today is the 16th day of February 2023, and I am reading a particular book from you here called The American Engineered um, Decline, which has been going on for quite a while. We have traitors within our own government who are willing to subject you to world laws, global laws. In reality, they're the biggest traders. So we're going to talk about these traders here, um, especially in the 1990s. Again, this is from a gentleman named William Norman Greer, Grigg. Unfortunately, he's no longer living. He's passed. He has done another book dealing with what I call the illegal alien issue in America. And we have people in office who think they know better than the people sometimes, and they pull off lies and they share things and as though they're progressive and they think they're smart, and all they do is they lie. So they are not a friend of mankind. They're not. So let's get into the book. And the chapter of the book is chapter 4, Caught in the WTO Web, which is WTO means World Trade Organization. Here's a quote from former Congressman Samuel B. Pettengill, as Pettengill, who was once a Democrat from the state of Indiana. And this is back in 1948 when he wanted to speak his mind back in the 90s. I'm against GATT, General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, forerunner to the World Trade Organization, because it's a part and parcel of international socialism, one worldism, and the slow surrender of America's sovereignty. The GATT calls for a vast complex of multilateral negotiations with many nations in sort of a world super legislation where we have one vote. Once wrapped up in the spider web, it will be difficult indeed to recapture any independence of action. Another quote. This is a quote from Columbia University professor and once a member of CFR, Richard Gardner, Gardner. He was a diplomatic insider, so he's not going to, he's going to see it rosy. The House of World Order will have to be built from the bottom up. That's why they're working from towns, folks. That's how they've been doing it. It's not from the federal station. It's from actually at the bottom where you call communities, cities. That's how they're doing it. It's not coming from the top down. It's coming from the bottom up. An end run around national sovereignty, eroding it piece by piece, will accomplish much more than the old-fashioned frontal assault. We'll be seeking new rules in the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade to cover a whole range of unregulated non-tariff barriers. These will subject countries to an unprecedented degree of international surveillance over up to now domestic policies such as foreign prices supports, subsidies, and government procurement practice that have transnational effects. It's all benefiting the people at the top. It doesn't benefit you at all. They're saying it clearly. So let's get to the meat of it. In November 2003, that is, the President of the United States received a directive to remove protective tariffs on steel imports. Remember, this is W for you Republicans out there. You embraced him for the quote unquote foreign powers that we did in Afghanistan and also Iraq, which was illegal. It is. He didn't direct his own army or his military. We fight. If you notice anything, let me just say this, folks. Ever since the World War II, have you noticed that all presidents do not get permission from Congress to fight a war? They go to the United Nations and get approval. Did you know that? Do you really realize what's going on here? That there is a coup d'etat has been going on for over 75 years in this country, folks. The body issuing that order described itself as an apex tribunal of the global trading system, Geneva-based appellate body of the WTO. So this is in Geneva, Switzerland. We have all this is based out of almost all this is based out of Europe. At The Hague, Brussels, and now in Geneva. The WTO tribunal ruled that Washington failed to demonstrate, this is what they do, to tribunal satisfaction, at least that the U.S. steel industry was genuinely threatened by a surge of imports of steel and related products. You're not going to get an even-handed plan here neither. Emboldened by the WTO ruling, the European Union immediately warned President Bush that he must quickly withdraw the 20-month-old tariffs or face retaliation in the form of $2.2 billion in duties or in U.S. goods. Who's ruling this country, folks? Who's ruling it? Is it not the United States, or is it a world government? So this is how it is, folks. These other countries gang up. This is not about independence anymore. So the 2-point duties in the U.S. 22 nations that had joined filed a WTO complaint against the tariffs. Initially set up at a 30%, but subsequently reduced, insisting that the appellate body ruling leaves the United States with no other choice but to terminate its WTO incompatible tariff measures without delay. So who's ruling the country here? Incredibly, the assumption that the United States we have to play by the rules, you see, must comply with an arbitrary ruling handed down by a foreign body was not challenged by the White House. President Bush's press secretary maintained that the protected tariffs on steel were fully consistent with WTO rules. Republican Senator Charles Grassley, head of the Senate Finance Committee, advised President Bush not to undermine the WTO supported authority. See, they're all in for it. Complying with our WTO obligations is an important sign of American leadership. Bullshit. You fucking traitor. I mean, these people swallowed the poison. This was not the first time that the United States or WTO has ruled against the United States, nor was it surprising that the body in which the EU outvotes the U.S. 15-1 would hand down a decision favoring European interests. And as we will see from the beginning, the WTO, like its predecessor, the aborted International Traders Organization, was designed to put America at a disadvantage as a visit to the rest of the world. We're being punished now because at one time we were doing the right thing. What is particularly striking about the tariff dispute is how little it has to do with free trade, which consists of mutual beneficial exchange between buyers and sellers unimpeded by government. When the U.S. approved creation of the WTO in 1994 under the Clinton administration. Yes, it was. Its supporters described the body as a necessity measure to lower tariff bearers worldwide. Jack Kemp, a former Republican congressman and Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, insisted that Republicans who used the sovereignty issue to oppose the creation of the WTO will be accused of failing to pass the largest international tax cut in history. Unfortunately, Jack Kemp has passed away too. He's from the state of New York. I think he was in the Buffalo area. But under the WTO regimes, nations and multinational trading blocs can enact tariffs when some measures find favor with the unelected globalist gnomes who occupy the WTO judicial panels. In the case of the United States, the U.S. Congress, which under the U.S. Constitution has the exclusive power to regulate our trade with foreign nations, surrendered this critical legislation power to a globalist body composed of foreign bureaucrats with no interest in our nation's prosperity or sovereignty. Furthermore, where Republican globalists like, that is Jack Kemp, urged Congress to surrender sovereignty in the interest of a tax cut. This is another dastardly deal, folks. What do you get paid for that, Jack? The actual result was American defeat on both accounts. Congress surrendered the power to regulate our nation's foreign trade and handed to a globalist body the power to set tax policies. After all, tariffs are taxes, folks, albeit of a much less invasive variety than the income tax during the administration of Thomas Jefferson. The federal government revenue came exclusively from the tariff. In his second inaugural address, President Jefferson boasted, "The suppression of unnecessary office enables us to discontinue our internal taxes. The remaining Revenue on the consumption of foreign articles is paid chiefly by those who can afford to add foreign luxuries to domestic comforts, being collected on our seaboard and frontiers only, and incorporated with the transaction of our mercantile citizens. It may be the pleasure and pride of the Americans to ask what farmer, what mechanic, what laborer ever sees a tax gatherer of the United States. It is hardly an exaggeration to say that the defending American interest in international trade was one of the most important motives for creating a constitutional union out of the 13 original colonies. And of course, most Americans, even those who dimly aware of our heritage, recall the emphatic Revolutionary War slogan, no taxation without representation. Yet Congress turned over vital powers over our policy on trade and taxes to a cabinet of unelected, unaccountable foreign social engineers, and it did so knowingly. Let's get down to the rhinos here. These are all rhinos here, folks, Republican in name only. Newt Gingrich's coup. The November 1994 midterm election resulted in a Republican majority for the first time since the early 1950s. Many, if not most, of the freshman representatives had been propelled into Congress on the strength of the public's concern over the growing expenses and intrusions of government, as well as the accelerating loss of American sovereignty to international organizations such as the UN. Following the election, incoming Senator Majority Leader Bob Dole and prospective Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich agreed to an extraordinary, listen to me folks, this is key, lame dunk section of the outgoing Congress. Do you understand what this is? This is why it's called a coup. Newt Gingrich, after the election of November, these people are sick. How much do you get paid for that, Newt? Piece of shit. You're nothing but a traitor. You are. You piece of shit. When you realize what these people have done to you and destroyed your lives, why would you call them anything else but pieces of shit? So what he did was he got a section after the election, knowing that the Republicans will have the control of the future, the next 2 years at least. He decides not to wait on them to come into office, but to do it before they get in the office. The purpose of that session was to approve U.S. membership in the WTO. You get it? Given the significance of that issue, why couldn't it await consideration by the incoming Congress, which was more clearly attuned to the public's concerns? And why would two conservative leaders to be so, they're not conservatives, folks, be so, that's another oxymoron. They're not, they're just in name only, Republican in name only. But not only that, they're not conservatives neither, folks. That's what the media tells you. To be so determined to have this important issue determined by a Democratic majority Congress. These questions effectively answered themselves. It was precisely because the incoming conservative Congress, like the public at large, was hostile to entangling commitments such as the proposed WTO that the lame duck group session was necessary. In other words, they knew they were going to have a hard time getting it through when these guys came in. Okay? In fact, Gingrich admitted in testimony before the House Ways and Means Committee that congressional approval of the WTO would present a fundamental change in our economic and political system by surrendering sovereignty to an emerging world government. I am just saying that we need to be honest about the fact that we are transferring from the United States as a practical level significant authority to a new organization. This is a transformational moment. Let me show you something here, folks. We'll hopefully get a chance to read this book. This is a book here some people need to read. This is The Third Way, or The Wave. And this is actually has a foreword by Newt Gingrich in here. So I hope to be sharing. This is from Alvin, A-L-V-I-N, Toffler, T-O-F-F-L-E-R, who I have a couple of his books here at the house. Okay, we'll look into him also. They're part of this whole thing. They're paid operatives. I agree this is very close to the European Union Treaty by which the EU members nations have surrendered their sovereignty And 20 years from now, we will look back on this as a very important defining moment. This is not just another trade agreement, folks. This is adopting something which twice, once in 1940s, once in 1950s, the U.S. Congress rejected. I'm not even saying we should reject it. In fact, I lean towards it, but I think we have to be very careful because it is very big transfer of power. So this is Newt Gingrich's statement. That's what he said. Gingrich's admonition that Congress should be careful in handling power to the WTA was disingenuous. It's like the fox guarding the hen house, since he and Dole had arranged to conduct the lame duck session on their fast-track rules. This meant that Congress had to vote the measure either up or down on an accelerated timetable. Under fast track, debate is limited to 20 hours, and Senate filibusters aren't permitted. These people are despicable. They're not worthy of any glory, folks. They're not. So much for careful deliberation. Furthermore, as was the case with NAFTA and GATT agreement, creating the WTO was actually a treaty disguised as a trade agreement. By packaging the pack in this fashion, WTO proponents, wait a minute, let me just say this. These bills, most of these bills are not even actually written by our government people. Do you know that? These bills, a lot of them are actually from outside forces to do this. Seriously. They might be some, this is such as, and correcting the T's and I's and all that kind of stuff. No, these were done by other people because this was in a hurry. By packaging the pack in this fashion, WTO proponents avoided the constitutional requirement that treaties win approval by 2/3 supermajority in the Senate. You hear that? You hear that? They bypass the Constitution, folks. They don't even obey the rules, and yet they're lawyers. You remember, that Jesus Christ warned you about these people, didn't he? Woe unto lawyers. And in WTO, nations of the so-called global South, as formerly known as the Third World, sometimes called with undue optimism the quote-unquote the development world, possesses 70% of the votes, and the U.S. has no veto vote. Why in the world would you join anything of that nature, folks? You are the most powerful country in the world. Why would you even be involved with it? It means simply they would have had no power over you, Nick and Poop. But in addition to surrendering congressional powers, the WTO is the words of liberal Harvard Law professor Lawrence Tribe, Tribe, shifts sovereignty from state and local governments to global body. This not only gives foreign bureaucrats the power to nullify state and local laws, did you know that? But also creates new opportunities for U.S. president to retaliate against political rivals. Shortly before Congress approved the WTO, former Treasury Department official Paul Craig Roberts expressed amazement that anyone in Congress wants to pass this bill that gives the president sole power to negotiate remedies when the WTO declares federal, state, and local laws illegal under GATT. This is all this is treason deal, folks. This is traitors. Why would you call them anything else? This power gives the White House a free hand to reward friends and to punish enemies. Yes, it does. At first glance, this enhancement of presidential power seems to contradict the international thrust of the WTO. Why would the measure empower both a cadre of unelected foreign bureaucrats and U.S. president? Wouldn't the president be inclined to work on behalf of our national interests? Yeah, you would think so. Of course, Americans would expect this of their president. But in practice, however, every president since Franklin D. Roosevelt has been surrounded by international advisors. Yeah, most of them are communists too, socialists, and has accordingly used the presidential power to advance global design. Well, actually, it goes all the way to Colonel House, all the way back in Woodrow Wilson's time. Are you well aware that Mr. Woodrow Wilson is the first president to have all these massive people in his cabinet to tell him what to do and how to do it? He was a progressive, folks. He was a communist. Well, I wouldn't say he was a communist. For sure, he was a socialist. He was a Fabian. And let me just say something, how this dialectic works, you see. It's a form of what we call, you have two powers, two principles. You have two pillars here. One is communism. One is capitalism, you merge them, pop them, and it becomes socialism. That's what you're seeing right before your eyes right now. And so that becomes the center of this. So you had two opposing powers. Bang, this is what you call, you create a synthesis. And then what happens, that synthesis begins, they'll do that usually later on, and it'll be another group, and it'll be a deal with such and such. It'll be another two towers again, and then it'll merge, pop it again. It's all about the Hegelian dialectic. And all of them are following this, folks. And the public are completely clueless on this. If you can get a chance, I would recommend you get Nicky Rapano's book, and any way you can. It's the most important book on this whole issue, folks. I've already done this whole videos. I've done probably 10 videos on this whole deal. Nicky Rapano was probably the most brilliant person to see what was really going on. I don't know of anybody else that ever even nailed it like her. No one nailed it like her. And unfortunately, she's passed. Executive branch betrayal. More than 4 decades ago, George W. Malone, a Republican senator from Nevada, warned that the pincer movement is now in operation both on the domestic and on the international scene. And evidence shows that the movement bodes no good for us. Our one jaw of the pincer was political, involving the already entanglements of our nation in international alliances and multilateral bodies such as the UN. It's worth noting that Senator Malone, a World War I veteran and military intelligence specialist, attended the UN founding conference in San Francisco as an official observer for the Senate Military Affairs Committee. He also toured at his own expense to Europe, Asia, and Middle East, primarily to investigate the uses to which U.S. foreign aid was put. A man of substantial academic achievement and considerable first-hand experience, Senator Malone could speak with authority about the developments he described and their implications for our nation's future. This is way back, folks, way back, before my time. Through a series of crucial decisions deftly undertaken by what Malone called a combination within our government, a basic segment of the sovereignty power of the people of the United States was removed from them and absorbed into American executive. That power was then used to make a series of commitments in the name of our nation. One of them was called the UNRRA, that is the United Nations Relief and Relocation Agency. Dunbar notes the secretive meeting to draft the UN Charter, the Bretton Woods Conference, which resulted in the International Bank and Fund, the preparatory conference for UNESCO, that is the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Committee. Why would you need a group like that unless you want to change the culture of countries, isn't it? The San Francisco Conference, which set up the United Nations, the NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, the SEATO, that is the Southeastern Asian Trade Organization. Is that right? Military, sorry, Treaty Organization. I said trade, I meant to say treaty. Military Alliance. The Genocide Convention, which we did up here, we didn't follow. The Declaration of Human Rights. You hear that word, human rights? Human rights don't mean anything to the UN folks. No, they don't. It's individual right. Get that in your head. Please, wake up. Your kids are going to hate you for the rest of your life, folks, because you didn't stand against what's going on right now, or educate them. And the best thing you do is actually take your kids out of school, period. The results of these decisions, concluded Senator Malone, was that our people have since been subject to court interpretation which rests on the purposes and principles of the Charter of the United Nations. They have actually, all of these congressmen supposedly, and all of them, have swear to basically to the Bible or whatever thing they swear to these days, to adhere to the Constitution. They don't even do it. They're liars. Once again, that is the political jaw of the pincers described by Senator Malone. The economic jaw was created by the Trade Agreement Act of 1934, which was under Franklin Roosevelt, in which Congress yielded to the president the power to control our nation's trade policy. They gave him the power to do this. They also did it also with the financial deal, with stealing people's gold, thus allowing the executive branch to surrender that authority to foreign bureaucrats. That power is now being increasingly vested in the international groups and removed from our, one of our countries all in a mess, removed from our nation's control. The most important of these groups, according to Senator Malone, was the GATT, G-A-T-T, which is identified as an instrument of growing international state. The next section, building the socialist world state. Malone warned that the intimate purpose of the pincers movement was to create a socialist world state in which our nation would lose its independence and Americans would lose their prosperity and their liberty. This was the true purpose of the movement misleadingly labeled free world trade. Correct. Although that slogan promised freedom from state interference in commerce, what it meant in practice was that the state would determine trade, each central government for its individual nation, and ultimately a central global trade authority for the entire world. With passage of the Trade Act of 1934, argues Senator Malone, the business and enterprise of individuals now was considered in close connection to the policies of the state. That's right. The state would assist them in the expansion of their markets. Government would negotiate the channels of trade. Roughly a decade later, as a war-weary nation was beguiled into supporting a global peacekeeping body called the United Nations. Do you remember that? Do you remember that the war that goes over to Korea, that we put ourselves under their jurisdiction? You wonder why basically China and Russia, when they're in North Korea, they knew a lot of times what we were doing. There were already spies in our own government also. Frankly, it was no reason for us to even be there. Men lost their lives for nothing, folks. Nothing. Same thing in Vietnam. Same thing in Iraq. Same thing in Afghanistan. Totally wasted your life going there. Roughly a decade later, a war-weary nation was beguiled to get, the International Trade Organization, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank. In late 1947, a delegation of U.S. internationals attended a conference in Havana to finish the framework for the ITO. Why would they go to Havana? Doesn't that strike you in 47? The executive committee chairman of the U.S. delegation to the Havana conference was the notorious Soviet agent trader Alger Hiss, HISS. Along with Soviet official V.M. Molotov, Hiss had been the chief co-author of the UN Charter. He also served as the Secretary General for the UN Founding Conference. Hiss, an eager and capable enemy of our country, clearly regarded the ITO as a means of hastening our nation's destruction. As would be the case with the WTO, the ITO envisioned a one nation, one vote scheme that would leave American trade policy in the hands of foreign rivals. Congressman Bertrand Gerhardt, Republican from California, described his Hiss-led delegation to the Havana conference as a boatload of smug diplomats, all wise economists, experts, theorists, specialists, and whatnots, sailing gaily from our shores to barter away the little factory in Wichita, the little shop in Kiobel. Fortunately, the ITO collided with the same patriotic opposition that had scuttled the attempt to entangle the U.S. in the League of Nations after World War I. The final ITO draft was finished on March 24, 1948, but the Pax Globus and socialist provisions provoked opposition from Congress and many of our nation's business associates. The ITO was described as a charter to free world trade, recalls Senator Malone. It was found to be a charter for trade control. The result of its adoption would have been socialism on a global plane. The entire document reflects excessive acceptance of economic planning, protested the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Say that again. The entire document reflects the excessive acceptance of economic planning, protested the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. The National Foreign Trade Council warned that if the United States subscribes to the charter, it will be abandoning traditional American principles and espousing instead planned economy and full-scale political control of production, trade, and monetary exchange. That's what's taking place right now, folks. The charter does not reflect faith in the principles of free, private, and competitive enterprises because of widespread opposition to the agreement. The ITO was never submitted to the Congress for ratification. Did you know that? I didn't know that. Wow. But the international's power elite is never willing simply to take no for an answer. They never quit, folks. They never quit. Preferring to interpret that response as not yet, but someday soon. Just as they had done when the League of Nations failed. The power elite regrouped, changed the name of the defeated global body, and prevailed in the 1994 rematch with the help of the globalists and the Republican Party leadership ranks. So anybody tells me the Republicans are really good people, you can go take a deep swim, okay? I was involved in the Republican Party. Unfortunately, I was in during these years with Reagan, and my eyes began to open in 2004, maybe that time, because that's when I left the party. And I don't vote anymore either. I will not vote. I will not participate in that. I will not give my consent to any of this shit. because both parties are working together. In our global neighborhood, they've been all bought too. UN, why do you think they pay millions and millions of dollars for get paid in the office when they make probably less than $175,000 a year? Think about it, folks. The UN-aligned Commission on Global Governance described the WTO's important role in global governance, that is, building world government. Particularly important is the establishment of a WTO to provide a stronger, more permanent successor to the GATT. Its establishment will be crucial building blocks for global economic global governments. The WTO and advanced regional groups such as the EU will increasingly be faced with the issue that will dominate their international economic agenda in years to come: how to create rules for deep integration that go way beyond what has traditionally been thought of as trade. I remember in 1979 or 78, it was maybe 80, at the university I went to, poli-sci major. And I think I've told this story many times, but it's this really sad fact that people are so gullible, even the political science undergrads, that most were in favor of having a world government. And I argued and argued with these people. It's like they were just comatose. You know, the thing that's really so sad about American people, they're so damn gullible. They're fucking gullible. Everything is said to them, they believe every word of it. They never discern, they never think about it, never think, wait a minute, there's something wrong with this. No, they never do that. They never think. They don't want to. Shook money in the U.S. economy. Just as the GATT, General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, began, that begat the WTO, the GATT and the WTO begat GATS, G-A-T-S, the General Agreement on Trade and Services. I didn't even know this, folks. Sorry. Like other instruments described as free trade measures, GATS, G-A-T-S, appears harmlessly or even beneficial, just as NAFTA and WTO are advertising ways to open up global commerce and goods. GATS, G-A-T-S, is described as a means of opening up global trade and services. Get that? Services. Wait a minute. Wow, these guys don't miss a stick, do they? The cold reality, however, is that GATS is another stealthy assault on a national sovereignty and federal system. Through GATS, the WTO is slowly, quietly, but persistently subverting the powers of our state and local governments and bringing literally every service job in the nation under the World Trade Body regulatory control. So, you know, the service jobs are not what you call manufactured jobs. They're actually what I call, they're cheap jobs, but they're going to be under the regulatory control. Let me see something real quick here. Let me get the I want to know what date this thing was. I think it's in 2000 something. It was published. First printing in April 2004. So that is 19 years ago. As the Office of U.S. Trade Representatives point out, services are what most Americans do for a living. Services and industry account for nearly 80% of U.S. employment and GDP production. With the acceleration and exodus of manufacturing and high-tech jobs from the United States, an increasing number of Americans will find themselves seeking work in service industries. Thanks to GATS, these Americans will find themselves facing the same race to the bottom that has claimed so many manufacturing jobs. It's all about destroying this country, folks. They hate us. These people have been so brainwashed, they hate us. A lot of these are young people in this country, too. GATS is not a single agreement like NAFTA or even standard regular body like the WTO. It's an open-ended process in which hordes of foreign bureaucrats review state and local laws governing the licenses and certificates of service workers, from beauticians to attorneys, and any other laws seen as impending global free trades and services. You get that? You get that, folks? This is amazing. And this is true. This is what, again, Nikki Rapano was talking about. They're changing law. Their laws are no longer based on, logic. They're all communitarian laws. It's all based upon the community. It's all based upon the majority, and destroys the individual. That's what it's about. And that's plain old communism, folks. That's what it is. They couldn't beat us on the battlefield, so they decided to use Trojan horse deals. And then you wouldn't have had any problem with this until we had traitors within our own offices. You got bought off for a few $10,000 or whatever to vote for something like this. I'm sure it's even less or more. Who knows? That's why I said, why would these people get paid? I mean, running for office, they have enormous amount of money given to them in the campaigning. That's a red flag immensely, folks. So what happens simply is in a job that makes $150,000 or less or whatever it is, they have sometimes $8 to $10 million, and not more, running for a congressman. What the hell's going on here? Because they're going to get the old good old back treatment. You see, I gave you such and such amount of money, and I expect you to hold up to your deal. So, under our constitutional system, they couldn't destroy the Constitution from within, folks. I mean, you see, they had to come in here with this, even though we had crooks here also. And we're still under that Constitution, folks. They have not voided that Constitution yet. And they want to successfully bipartisan. They want to push it away and hope you forget about it. That's what they want you to do. Under our constitutional system, all powers not explicitly granted to the central government are reserved to the states and the people. These numerous and indefinite powers, to use James Madison's phrase, includes the power to establish licensing guidelines for service industries as well as regulatory government land use and owners. It's true, of course, that these powers can be abused by local and state governments. I grant you that. But one assumption behind our constitutional system is that local and state governments would be more immediately accountable to the people, and that where those powers are abused, people would have the option of choosing to live elsewhere. The potential cost of losing productive population would serve as a check on the regulatory ambitions of state governments. Indeed, something of this sort happened in California during the 1990s, as business owners and taxpayers fled the overtaxed, overregulated Golden State, so to speak. They did. They left, and they're leaving again. And they are now actually, I don't know if you know this, those that leave now are going to hold taxes back to California. They want to do that. Did you know that? Do you know that? I tell you, these people are really sick, aren't they? They're begging for a hurting, aren't they? Think about it. And under our Constitution, no state government can properly meddle in the regulatory affairs of other states. Not that there would really be any incentive to do so. When one state imposes unreasonable regulatory burdens on business and industry, other states with more sensible policies benefit economically. That's why other states have got these people in. Our federated constitutional government was the natural complement to a market-based economy. This combination led to an unprecedented prosperity and technological progress. GATS, G-A-T-S, is the effort to destroy American economic system by forcing all states, local communities to conform to the allegiance of the conclave of globalists in Geneva. People you never even heard of, people never even seen. Consider, for example, efforts by European Union GATS negotiations to force state governments to remove discrimination laws, regulating accounting, auditing, bookkeeping services. Secret GATS negotiation documents leaked from Europe record EU objectives to laws of several states requiring in-state offices and residential requirements. The EU also demanded removal of residential requirements for engineers, insurance workers, and so forth. The EU also demanded the removal of state laws requiring U.S. citizenship or residence for members of the board and incorporators of service-related businesses. Do you understand what the hell's going on here, folks? This is why you're having foreign people here. It is clear that GATS will eventually facilitate foreign challenges to in laws governing the license of attorneys. Yes. Medical professors, and over highly specialized service workers. At 28 Democratic congressmen complained in a letter of the U.S. Trade Representative, the only service exempted from GATS would be those services applied in the exercise of government authority, defined as any service which is supplied neither on a commercial basis nor in a complete competition with one or more service providers. These are critical terms that remain undefined and could be interpreted by a dispute panel in a way that renders the exemption meaningless. It was the states that created our federal government, you know, and allowed it limited revocable powers, after all, until the early 20th century. The United States was understood to be a plural construction, and as these United States in Congress, that is, the U is non-capitalized. The state is capitalized, meaning the states are the prime motivator. And Congress assembled. The process of consolidating the states into a monolithic under the power of the central government began with the post-Civil War reconstruction, of course. Gained momentum during World War I, accelerated rapidly during the, not rapidly, radically during the New Deal, and has continued relentless ever since. Hasn't stopped. The GATS process represents the next logical step, putting state governments under the control of global central government. That's why I didn't understand that. Now it makes perfect sense. So what's going to happen eventually, folks? You're not going to even have representatives in your own state. Did you know that? That means there's either going to be no elections you won't have a choice. Once again, the rationale offered by proponents for this power grab is the necessity of removing impediments to free trade. Among these impediments are the powers reserved to the states for the specific purpose of protecting the people against the encroachments of a central government. The distinct, unaccountable bureaucrats seeking to absorb those powers certainly don't have our nation's best interest in mind. They don't care. And this is what I'm figuring some things out here. It's unbelievable. This country is completely coming apart. Look around you. Ever since the COVID, which was nothing but a psyop. That's all it was, folks. It was a psyop. Nothing but a psyop. So, exporting jobs and importing workers. So this is what's happening. They're bringing people in this country now. Through the H-1B and L-1 visa programs, foreign non-immigrant specialist workers are permitted to work in the United States. Do you understand what the hell is going on here, folks? As noted in Chapter 1, these programs have been used to train the workforces of foreign competitors, thereby fueling the outsourcing of technical jobs overseas. In 1995, GATS agreement locked the United States on an annual ceiling of 65,000 H-1B visas and an unlimited number of L-1 visas, which permit intercompany transfer of foreign workers from abroad to the United States. Just as importantly, it inaugurated a process through which foreign interests can challenge any limits on such temporary immigration, I should say, as discriminatory. Who gives a damn? If you're not fucking upset about this, what the hell where are you at? Thereby forcing our nation to continue building a well-trained workforce that will benefit our economic competitors. Dan Stein of the Federation for American Immigration Reform points out that under GATS, the United States bound itself by international agreement not to restrict either of these visas programs in the future, regardless of the state of the U.S. economy or the level of unemployment of similar qualified U.S. workers. That's why there are people who are living here in this country who can't get a fucking job. It's often difficult to tell these days if economics exists to serve the needs of the people or the other way around, continues Stein. Trade policies that include provisions for unfettered movements of people across international borders for the purpose of providing ever cheaper labor leads us further down the path towards standing the relationship between people and economies on its head. At some point, the pursuit of cheaper products and cheaper work has become a race to the bottom, folks, which is in the long run will cripple the middle class American families and destroy assets to the American dream for millions of American workers. And we're seeing it now, right in front of me. Part of it's due to inflation. From improving the quality of life for middle class Americans, so-called free trade agreements like GATT, WTO, and GATS, G-A-T-S, will eventually destroy the American middle class. They're already doing it. They're already doing it. Let me just say something. There's no point in going to college anymore, folks. There isn't. It's best now you actually work for yourself. Seriously, work for yourself. And don't tell the bloody government what the hell you're doing. It's none of their damn business anymore. This is a war. This is people who actually destroyed this country. Not this fucking country, but they destroyed this country. These are people you respect and you say sir to. Frankly, they don't need any respect. In fact, you need to spit on them. And people, that might sound harsh, but if you understand how they've done you, slaves don't tolerate this shit. That's what they've done to us. And this was the greatest country in the world, folks. Economically, politically, freedom. We were the envy of the world. And we had these little goats, these little nannies, who bought into this. And they were put in office for that. And they were traitors. Don't ever tell me any rhino Republican's a good man. There aren't any, folks. Not the guy in Florida is not worth shit, the governor. Not the state governor here in South Carolina. None of these people are worth voting. If you just simply stop fucking voting, they would get the fucking message real quick. Because you should be getting goddamn mad about these people. And there are other people out here that really bother me too. They say, well, we're just going to wait till everything falls apart, not fall apart, but everything's going to work out. Really? Bullshit. That type of talk was also the talk that took place when the Soviet Union was there, and the Russians, the communists came in, and they destroyed that country. They killed over 85 million people, folks. And similar trade pacts is to consolidate power, not to expand prosperity. The real objective is to destroy national sovereignty and erect a global government, not to remove impediments to honest commerce. Legitimate free trade is the path to reduce government and expanding individual liberty. The globalist counterfeit being offered today is a highway to universal serfdom, slavery. And that's why I've always said simply he calls it legitimate free trade. I call it laissez-faire. What means simply is that you do no harm. You make your business. You do it yourself. You do the best you can, and you prosper. That allows a free government. This the whole basis of any kind of foundation for any free country is you have to have legitimate freedom, liberty in the area of your building your business, working in order to have a free government. It doesn't work anywhere else, folks. It will not work with a government such and such at the bottom. It has to be the foundation to do with what we call, again, you being free to do whatever you want to, as long as it harms no one and you make money at it, that's fine. That's why the people had this type of form of government, you see? So, again, I just want to thank you for that. And I'm very straightforward. I don't play games because, frankly, I'm 62 years old. And I'm tired of this shit. I'm tired of being lied to. I don't want to hear any fancy writings or whatever you want to call it from these people, because these people are not worthy of respect at all. Neither is lawyers, neither are preachers. These people tell you lies. Lawyers are one of the worst because all they do is espouse legalese. They're not truly following the land of the law. They're following the land of the sea, which is commerce. And we're under that whole thing of commerce. It's all about trading, you see. It's about international law also. That's part of it, international business, you see. And it's infected this country in a lot of ways. And lawyers who are despicable think they're doing the right thing, and they've destroyed many, many, many people's lives by throwing people in jail of some legal thing. And if it hadn't been for the basically, I've talked about it too also, the issue. Because see, they'd actually passed to simply keep lawyers out of the House, keep them out of Congress. Back in the 1820s, 1830s. They legitimately did that. And by the 1850s and 1860s, I'm pretty sure the Lincoln administration bypassed that. In fact, that was the original 13th Amendment, folks. Look up the missing 13th Amendment by David Dodge. Dave Dodge, you'll find out simply is that it passed legitimately. 3/4 of the state passed it, which is what they should be. All these treaties we're doing, that's supposed to be 3/4 of states. And they don't even do that. They don't do 3/4 of even Congress anymore. These congressmen are just simply bought and paid for. They don't have a backbone at all. So, you get disappointed by voting. Maybe the best thing to do is not vote at all. Really, seriously. Because you know what? It doesn't do any good. And when the people, 80% people say no, basically they don't vote. They don't consent. We don't consent anymore. You don't have the power from the people anymore, and the government's going to fall. It has to fall. Unless you recognize that and see it for what it is, you keep voting, you keep it in power. That's what you do. And by your actions, you say everything is okay. Is what you say. I agree, everything's okay. And you consent. And I don't consent, folks. I will not. So thank you for this today. Thank you for listening. We'll get to the next chapter, chapter 5 sometime. And again, thank you for listening. Have a grand day, that is. And appreciate everyone being here. This book is a great book, but I suggest this immensely to read Nikki Rapano's book. It's talking about communitarianism. And I can't think of the title right now on the top of my head. But it is by far the best book for me because what it done is allowed to connect it for me to understand what is going on now. And they're part of the propaganda. If you listen to all these kind of things, all this global stuff, this and that, you hear it all over the media, radio, TV, everything. You never hear anything about your country anymore, folks, because your country's dead. Your country's been destroyed from within. The Trojan horse has come in, you see. And I'm older. I've been through a lot of things. I've been in business. I've worked for other people. My major in college was political science. All these things, many other things. Studied law. Didn't want to be a lawyer. I knew that I didn't want to be a lawyer. I knew it was wrong when one lawyer can send someone to jail, and then the next lawyer, another one comes along and you can actually get them out of jail. I'm talking about serious deals here. I'm talking about murder, rape, anything of that nature. It's a game. People don't follow it because they don't understand it, or either don't want to understand it. They don't understand how bad it's gotten. But if you think it's bad now, it's nowhere near as bad in the next few years. It's not. And I wholeheartedly wish people would pull their kids out of school and teach them yourself. You can teach them. You can do that. You're not going to have any money, folks. What are you going to do with it? You're not going to be able to buy anything either, you see. But anyway, I'm running a little late here. Not running late, but just need to go. So thank you for listening. You have a good day. Take care. Bye.